At 12 hours 0 minutes and 1 second AM, your bank account stops looking like a number and starts looking like a mistake. Not a small mistake, not the kind you fix with a transfer and a polite email. A civilization-level mistake. The balance is so large it stops being useful as information. It becomes atmosphere. You can feel it before you fully understand it. Every person who has ever told you money is just a tool was talking about a different species of money. For exactly 24 hours, you are the richest person who has ever lived. And the first thing that happens is not joy, it is pressure. Because the moment the number becomes real, every part of your life that was built around limitation begins to collapse under the weight of unlimited choice. You can buy what you want, you can fix what you want, you can move what you want, you can acquire time, attention, access, land, influence, and in some cases, entire institutions. That sounds freeing until you realize freedom at that scale comes with a new burden. Now every decision matters more, and every bad one can move the world. The first hour, you do not sleep. Nobody sleeps when the number changes that much. You sit in the dark and refresh the account again, not because the number will change, but because your mind has not yet accepted that this is not a joke, not a glitch, not a dream caused by exhaustion and bad lighting and too much caffeine. It is real. Your phone starts buzzing within minutes. The first messages are from your bank, then your family, then numbers you do not recognize, then people who have somehow become aware of your existence in the same instant the wealth appeared. The bank does not know how to behave. No one does. Some systems break instantly. Transfer limits are too low. Security alerts trigger. Private banking teams escalate. Phone calls go to senior staff who have never handled a balance this large and are now speaking in the soft, reverent tone people use around weather disasters and national emergencies. You spend the first hour proving you are still human. You answer identity questions. You authorize holds. You confirm transactions. You learn that even $1 trillion still has to pass through systems built by people who assumed nobody would ever need that much liquidity at once. The absurdity of it would be funny if it were not so operational. By 1 a.m., your team has assembled. Lawyers, bankers, security, tax advisors, family office managers, a person whose entire job is now to make sure no one panics while the number settles. The first decision is simple. You do not spend anything yet. You wait, because the first 24 hours of being a trillionaire are not about buying things. They are about not doing something irreversible while your nervous system is still catching up to the scale of the event. What changes immediately? The first real change is not material, it is perception. You look at the world differently when $1 billion stops being meaningful in the way it used to be. A private jet is not a fantasy. A city block is not a fantasy. A sports franchise is not a fantasy. A media company, a logistics network, a hotel chain, a power utility, a shipping port, a satellite company, a museum wing, a foundation, a government bond portfolio large enough to reshape markets. None of it feels impossible anymore. That is the danger. When everything is possible, the mind starts confusing permission with wisdom. The people around you notice this before you do. Your advisors do not ask, "What do you want?" They ask, "What is the purpose?" Because at this scale, the wrong answer to that question is expensive in ways that cannot be measured on a statement. So you slow down, you spend the morning reading instead of buying, you look at the balance sheet, the tax exposure, the geopolitical implications, the liquidity profile, the reputational risk, the operational obligations. It turns out that being a trillionaire for 24 hours does not mean you can simply spray money at the world and solve it. It means you have the power to create consequences. And consequences, unlike purchases, do not come with a return policy. The first purchase still, you have to test the edge of the world somehow. So you buy something small, not because it is small in ordinary terms, because it is small in your new terms. A private island could wait. A shipping company could wait. A football club could wait. You buy a bakery, not a chain. A bakery in a neighborhood you remember from before the number. The place your mother used to take you on Sundays. The one with the cracked tile floor and the old display case and the woman who remembered your name even when you were too young to understand why that mattered. You do not buy it because it will make money. You buy it because for one day, you can make the transaction that your younger self would have thought was impossible and your older self knows is almost meaningless in financial terms and profoundly meaningful in emotional ones. You buy the building, the recipes, the staff contracts, the lease, the equipment, and the right to keep it exactly as it is for as long as you want. Then you do the strangest thing of all. You tell them to keep baking. No rebrand, no luxury transformation, no logo unveiling, no influencer campaign. Just keep baking. This is what billionaires often misunderstand when they become absurdly rich. They think the point is to optimize everything. Sometimes the point is to preserve something small long enough for other people to keep needing it. The bakery does not need disruption. It needs continuity. You can buy that. So you do. The problem of scale by midday, the surreal part wears off and the practical part begins. $1 trillion is not spendable in the way people imagine. Not immediately. Not casually. Not without moving markets, attracting scrutiny, and generating side effects that are larger than the purchase itself. If you try to buy too much at once, you distort prices. If you acquire too openly, people react. If you act too quickly, institutions panic. So the first thing your team does is not spend. It structures. They create holding entities. They isolate liabilities. They map public assets from private ones. They segment the impossible number into portfolios small enough to manage. That is the real trick of enormous wealth. You do not touch the money directly. You route it through structures that make it usable, defensible, and legible. The trillion is not sitting there as one giant pile. It becomes families of capital, foundations, operating companies, long-term vehicles, infrastructure funds, real estate platforms, private market allocations, liquidity reserves, strategic reserves, research pools, impact pools, political risk pools. And once it is divided, it becomes functional. You are no longer a person with a number. You are an ecosystem of numbers trying to behave like a single mind. What you buy in the afternoon, you buy influence, but carefully. You do not want headlines that say you tried to own the world in a day. You want headlines that say nothing at all. So you buy stakes that matter. A hospital technology platform that can reduce wait times across dozens of cities. A logistics network that can improve food distribution in underdeveloped regions. A media company that can keep a newsroom independent for another decade. A decaying transit hub that can be rehabilitated instead of abandoned. A utility infrastructure upgrade in a region where the grid is failing too often. A small portfolio of apartment buildings that can be stabilized before they are converted into worse housing. You start to understand that trillionaire power is not just about luxury, it is about allocation. Every dollar can be a vote for how the future behaves. At this scale, the vote is louder, so you become more careful than you expected to be. A lot of people assume that unlimited money would make you reckless. The opposite happens first. Unlimited money makes you aware of how much damage a careless idea can do. A bad purchase is no longer just a bad purchase. It can displace workers. It can create speculative bubbles. It can wipe out competitors. It can alter the behavior of entire markets. So, you ask harder questions than you ever asked when you were poor. Not because you are noble, because you are accountable to consequences now. What your family thinks your family is not processing the same event you are. For them, the number is still a shock. For you, it is an operating problem. Your mother wants to know if you are safe. Your father wants to know if the money can disappear. Your sibling wants to know if this means nobody in the family will ever have to worry again. Your cousin wants to know whether you can help with a business. Someone older in the family wants you to be humble. Someone younger wants to know if you can buy a house before the end of the week. You answer all of them carefully, because the hardest part of sudden wealth is not the wealth. It is the way it reorganizes expectation. The people you love do not stop loving you. They start imagining you differently. They imagine generosity. They imagine access. They imagine a future in which your number becomes their safety net. Some of that will be true, Some of it cannot be true without destroying the structure that made the number useful in the first place. So you begin setting boundaries immediately, not because you want distance, because you need truth. You can help. You cannot become the permanent solution to every problem in your family. That truth is uncomfortable. It is also necessary. The market reacts. By evening, the markets know something happened. Not the full story, not the detail, but enough. Anything this large leaks into the financial system like heat into glass. Investors begin asking questions. Credit teams begin adjusting exposure. Analysts begin speculating about what your capital could mean if deployed strategically. Competitors start moving preemptively. Journalists want to know whether you will buy a sports team, a country club, a media empire, or a political position. The answer is none of those first, because the most powerful thing you can do in 24 hours is often not buying a crown jewel. It is not making the kind of mistake that forces everyone else to react. So you do the boring thing first. You park liquidity. You build time. The trillion is real, but the ability to use it well is still under construction. That is the part people miss when they fantasize about infinite money. They imagine the purchase. They do not imagine the administration. Midnight to midnight. The last 12 hours are less glamorous than the first 12. You spend them in meetings. Some of the meetings are about security, some about tax, some about privacy, some about succession, some about how to communicate with the world without creating panic, market distortion, or opportunistic behavior from institutions that would love to turn your 24-hour event into a long-term arrangement. You discuss what happens if the wealth is temporary. You discuss what happens if it is permanent. You discuss what happens if it is a mistake in the system that will be corrected at midnight. You discuss what happens if the number is tied to some external condition you cannot control. No one has certainty. That is the point. Unlimited money does not remove uncertainty. It reveals where uncertainty has been hiding all along. And beneath all of it, a quieter thought keeps returning. If you had always been this wealthy, would you still know what matters? That question follows you through the whole day. The bakery says yes, the infrastructure says maybe, the family says complicated, the markets say irrelevant. The world says it depends on what you do with the power. So you keep thinking. And by the last hour, thinking has become the only thing that feels responsible. The last decision at 11:47 p.m., you make the biggest choice of the day. You do not spend the rest. You commit it. Not in the sense of donating all of it blindly. Not in the sense of trying to dominate every sector. You create a framework. A portion goes to a permanent foundation focused on public health, infrastructure resilience, and educational access. A portion goes into long-term stewardship vehicles designed to preserve the capital across generations. A portion goes into a strategic investment platform that can back businesses solving supply chain, housing, energy, and medical access problems. A portion is reserved for direct humanitarian response, where speed matters more than ceremony. You do not treat the money like an opportunity to become a mythical figure. You treat it like a responsibility that happened to arrive in your hands for reasons you may never understand. That is the real difference between being rich and being powerful. The rich ask, "What can I get?" The powerful ask, "What should exist?" At this level, money is no longer about ownership. It is about authorship. You are writing conditions into the world. 12 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds AM. The 24 hours end. The number changes back. Or it does not. Maybe the wealth was temporary. Maybe it was a test. Maybe it was a miracle. Maybe it was a malfunction. Maybe it was a one-day window into what power feels like when it has been stripped of its usual boundaries. Either way, the day is over. The world is still standing. The bakery is still baking. The systems you helped shape will continue functioning without needing you to refresh a screen. The foundations exist. The structures exist. The decisions are now embedded in places that do not disappear at midnight. And that is when you understand the final truth of it. The experience was never really about having $1 trillion for 24 hours. It was about realizing that the scale of wealth matters less than the scale of responsibility you are willing to accept inside the time you are given. Because money can create access. It can create leverage. It can create entire worlds of possibility, but it cannot decide what kind of person you are when the world suddenly gives you more than you could ever reasonably hold. That decision is still yours. Always was. Always will be.